Across every ancient civilization, buried in every sacred text, is the same terrifying story, a story they never taught you in school. It says we weren't born here. We were brought here, engineered by beings who descended from the stars. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. The Egyptians knew them as the Neteru, and from the Mayans to the Hopi, they all warn, our creators will return. This is the forbidden history of the human race. From the earliest moments of recorded history, humans have looked to the stars, wondering if we were meant to be more than mere creatures of Earth. Across countless civilizations, we hear echoes of similar myths, gods descending from the heavens, beings from distant stars shaping our world and guiding us toward knowledge. But what if these aren't just stories? What if our origins are not as simple as we've been taught? The question has lingered. Were we created by gods, or were we engineered by beings who came from far beyond our planet? Ancient texts from the Sumerian tablets to the Egyptian hieroglyphs speak of divine beings, Anunnaki, Nephilim, and others who didn't just rule from a distance, but walked among us. They didn't descend on clouds of light. They arrived in ships from distant stars, bringing knowledge and tools to shape the course of humanity. Could it be that our history, as we know it, has been written not by the hands of kings and conquerors, but by those who shaped us from the very beginning? Join us on a journey to uncover what history may have concealed. When night falls over the southern plains of Iraq, once the cradle of ancient Sumer, something stirs in the air, something older than ruins, older than the wind that moves through shattered ziggurats and buried temples. It's not a sound, not a whisper, but a presence, an echo that doesn't belong to any people alive today. It feels like memory, but not ours, etched into clay tablets, locked away in the first written language ever conceived. Is a story that's been waiting for thousands of years to be heard again. The Sumerians didn't just write about crops or kings. They told of gods who didn't descend from the heavens on rays of sunlight, but came from the stars carrying tools and intent. They called them the Anunnaki. They weren't spirits or metaphors. According to Sumerian myth, they arrived when the earth was still wild and empty, long before humanity existed. They didn't appear in clouds of light or fire. They landed like engineers, not saviors. Their mission wasn't redemption, it was resource extraction. They came from a distant place, maybe a star, maybe a planet, but what they wanted was clear: gold. Not for jewelry, but for something more desperate. The story says their homeworld was dying, its atmosphere thinning, and gold, with its unique properties, could help shield it. Earth had what they needed, in a world where gods are usually kept at a safe distance, up on mountaintops or behind veils of mystery. The Sumerians described their gods walking among them, not above them, among them, eating with them, ruling over them, issuing commands and punishments. Anu, the god of the sky, and Kai, the goddess of the earth, were said to be the primal forces, the first pair. From them came Enlil, the god of air and storms, strict and commanding, and Enki, the god of water, knowledge, and mischief, clever, compassionate, and dangerous. These weren't distant deities, they were personalities, and they were in charge. But even gods grow tired of labor. At first they had a servant class, lesser gods called the Igigi, who did the hard work. They dug the canals, tended the fields, and carried out the will of their overlords. But one day, the Igigi had enough. The myth says they rose up not in battle, but in refusal. They dropped their tools. They rebelled, and faced with a workforce that no longer obeyed, the higher gods had a decision to make. Enki came forward with a solution, not a compromise, a creation. They would make a new being, not entirely divine, not entirely beast, something in between, something from this world, but touched by theirs. The story says they took clay from the earth and mixed it with the blood of a sacrificed god. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was instructions. The result was a being that could speak, move, understand commands, and endure. The first humans, not born, but made, not free, but designed. They were created to serve, not to dream. But inside that first breath, maybe in the blood of that sacrificed god, something else was hiding. Awareness. Not immediately. It started slowly. A spark, a curiosity. These new beings weren't just tools. They remembered. They wondered. They looked up at the stars and didn't just see lights. They saw questions. They drew symbols, mapped seasons, made stories. They weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to dig. Enki saw this awakening and smiled. He had always believed in bending the rules and giving humanity just a little more than they were allowed. He gave them knowledge, how to grow, how to heal, how to speak to the gods. But Enlil didn't smile. Enlil saw danger. He saw the same pattern that had played out before with the Agigi. He saw rebellion in the making, so he tried to limit them. He sent plagues, droughts, storms, punishments. He wanted them small, quiet, controllable. It's not hard to see where this story went. The serpent in the garden, the forbidden fruit, a god warning two humans not to eat from the tree of knowledge, and another force encouraging them to taste it. What if that serpent wasn't evil? What if it was Enki again, offering truth in a world ruled by fear? What if the god who cast them out wasn't punishing them for sin, but for daring to know too much? Eventually, the gods disappeared, or so the story says. But Sumerian texts never claimed they died, only that they left or stepped back or went underground, and yet they left behind their names, their warnings, and whispers of their return. Some say they're still here, watching, guiding, manipulating. Others believe they'll come back when the time is right, when humanity is either ready or ripe. What's haunting isn't just the myth, it's the reason behind it. If humans weren't created in love, but in exhaustion, if we weren't meant to be free, but useful, then every story we've told since might be an act of rebellion. Every poem, every invention, every question about who we are and where we come from might be a long echo of that first quiet defiance. Maybe we were never supposed to look up. Maybe that's why we always have. The desert heat over the Nile doesn't just shimmer, it breathes. It curls off the sun-scorched stones of ancient temples, twisting the air like a memory not fully faded. In this place where time seems to move slower, where shadows fall over statues with eyes that never close, something lingers that is not entirely of earth. The Egyptians didn't speak of gods in the abstract. They sculpted them, painted them, mummified them. Their gods weren't whispers in the clouds. They were rulers, builders, blood, the Neteru. That's what they called them. Not spirits, not ideas, but presences. Beings who walked beside men and showed them how to shape stone, how to command the floods, how to arrange life into perfect symmetry. These weren't invisible forces. They had forms, sometimes human, sometimes strange. Falcon-headed, jackal-eyed, lion-breasted. Some bore elongated skulls, smooth and high like helmets. Others had limbs too long, eyes too wide, and crowns that didn't just symbolize power, they concealed it. They say the first of them came during the Zep Tepi, the first time, a mythical golden age before the rise of mortal kings. Back then, the earth was raw, chaos barely tamed, and the gods descended not as phantoms, but as sovereigns. Ra, the great creator, stood at the beginning, not with thunder or fire, but with will, shaping the world with breath and thought. After him came Osiris, Isis, Horus, names still echoing in ruined halls, but the myth said they didn't just rule. They birthed a legacy not through stories, through blood. The pharaohs weren't considered godlike. They were gods, not symbols, flesh. They carried within them the divine essence of the Neteru, passed down generation after generation. The temple said it plainly. The kings didn't serve the gods. They were their descendants. Their authority wasn't earned. It was inherited, written in the very shape of their skulls and the gold woven into their bones. In tomb after tomb, archaeologists found the same thing. Skulls unlike any others, elongated, stretched backward as if grown for something more than human thought. The official answer was cranial binding, an ancient practice of shaping the skull in infancy. But some of these skulls didn't show signs of external manipulation. The shapes seemed natural, not forced, the proportions off, the volume greater. And in the silence of those chambers, where the air hasn't moved in centuries, a darker possibility whispers, what if those weren't shaped to imitate gods, but to reveal them? Carvings deep within the pyramids depict beings sailing through the stars, wielding staffs that glowed, opening gateways with a gesture. We're told these are metaphors, but if they were, why such precision? Why such repetition across continents? Why do the eyes of the statues follow you as if remembering? Why do the walls speak of ships that didn't sail on water but flew through fire? One figure rises from this haze like a thread pulled tight across time. Thoth, the scribe. He is often shown with the head of an ibis, but beneath that mask is a deeper mystery. He was not just a god, he was a recorder, a teacher, the one who knew the secret names of the cosmos. Legends say he carried with him the Book of Thoth, a text so powerful it could summon the dead and destroy the world in the same breath. Not myth, blueprint. This feels familiar, too familiar. In Sumer, there was Enki, god of wisdom, rebellion, protector of mankind. In both stories, it's the same rhythm, a divine being smarter than the rest, quietly undermining the strict order of heaven to elevate humanity. Always the whisperer, always the one who knew too much. Across the ancient world, the parallels multiply. Ra, the solar deity who guided the sun's daily journey, mirrors Anu, ruler of the sky in Sumer. Enlil, bringer of storms and order, shares the violent streak of Set, god of chaos. Even the mythology folds together like reflections on opposite mirrors. If the gods of Egypt and Sumer were different names for the same beings, then what does that say about how far they traveled and how long they stayed? But the pyramids are the loudest testimony, colossal, impossibly precise. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned with near mathematical perfection to the cardinal directions. The dimensions match ratios found in pi and phi. Its base is almost perfectly level despite the shifting desert sands. This is not the work of trial and error. It's not the product of copper chisels and wooden rollers. Some stones weigh over 70 tons. No one knows how they were moved. No one knows why they resonate. And yet they stand indifferent to wind and time, as if designed to last until we were ready to understand them. Some say the pyramids were tombs, but no mummy was ever found inside the Great Pyramid. No carvings, no treasure, just vast empty chambers and silent passageways that hum with forgotten intention. Some believe they were energy devices using the natural piezoelectric properties of limestone, quartz, and granite to amplify Earth's energy. Others see them as star maps aligned to Orion's belt, guiding the soul into the afterlife, or perhaps something more literal. In temple walls, gods hold objects shaped like tuning forks, emit beams from open palms, wear helmets that shimmer with static. Were these depictions symbolic? Or were they drawn by hands that had seen something very real, very bright, and very not human? Egypt didn't hide its gods behind mystery. It etched them in stone. It built entire cities to honor them. It offered its dead to join them. But even here, in the heart of devotion, the gods withdrew. One by one, the Neteru faded into legend, their bloodlines diluted, their knowledge sealed away in sand and shadow. But the stones remain, and their eyes remain open. Beneath the burning Indian sun, where sacred rivers cut through jungles thick with heat and prayer, there lives a memory that hums through the earth like the vibration of an ancient engine. Here, temples rise like mountains carved from time itself, etched with the stories of gods who didn't just rule from the sky, they fought over it. Their names are older than most languages still spoken. They are the Devas and the Asuras, shining ones and shadowed ones, light and thunder. But the more you listen to their stories, the harder it becomes to tell who was good and who was dangerous, because power in these tales is never simple. The Rig Veda, a collection of hymns so old its origin drifts into the fog before history, doesn't describe peaceful heavens. It sings of war, not with arrows and shields, but with weapons that burned the sky and turned entire worlds to ash. The Devas wielded celestial fire. The Asuras struck back with weapons that shimmered like lightning and cracked the air open. These were not metaphors. These were descriptions passed down by generations who remembered something. Not a vision, not a dream, but a war no one could explain away. One text, the Mahabharata, is as large as it is terrifying. It tells of Kurukshetra, a battlefield soaked in the blood of gods and mortals, and of a weapon so bright it outshone 10,000 suns. Its blast reduced everything to nothing. Cities turned to shadows. Men and animals disintegrated. Survivors suffered from sickness no one understood. Hair fell out, skin peeled, food spoiled in the fields. The land itself rejected life, becoming a cursed scar in the earth. The tale reads like the testimony of someone standing too close to a nuclear fire. And then, there are the Vimanas. These were not chariots pulled by horses or boats sailing rivers. They were flying palaces, machines of metal and fire described in detail that makes the skin prickle. Some were shaped like discs, some like arrows, some soared, some hovered, some could disappear from sight entirely. In the Ramayana, the hero Rama pilots one across oceans. It's not poetry, it's instruction. One text, the Vaimanika Shastra, written in Sanskrit, breaks down how these machines functioned. It speaks of propulsion systems using mercury and spinning vortices, concepts lost for millennia and somehow still echoing the language of modern aerospace. It's easy to dismiss it. Too strange, too detailed, too impossible. But buried cities like Mohenjo-Daro hold secrets that match the tone. In one layer of ash and ruin, skeletons lie hand in hand in streets turned to glass. There is evidence of heat so intense it fused stone. No fire from torches could have done that. No volcano had touched this place, just silence and vitrification. Stone melted as if touched by a sun pulled down to earth. The gods in these stories didn't whisper from clouds. They took sides. Vishnu, the preserver, came down in many forms, avatars, each one stepping into human history when chaos tipped the scale. He was the balance, the fix, the restart button. Shiva the destroyer didn't simply break what was broken, he burned it clean. His third eye wasn't a symbol, it was a weapon. When it opened, entire dimensions shook, creation and death in a single blink. And Brahma the creator didn't birth life with dust and dreams. He engineered it. His mind birthed universes, his thoughts coded into flesh. In one version of the story, humans weren't born, but assembled, pieces from the earth infused with divine consciousness. The theme loops again, beings from beyond shaping life, not from kindness, but calculation. Between these gods was a war not just for the heavens, but for humanity's soul. The Devas gave knowledge, agriculture, language, ethics. The Asuras, sometimes painted as villains, also offered strength, freedom, rebellion. What makes one divine and the other demonic? Is it simply who writes the songs afterward? The ancient texts divide the universe into layers, realms stacked like a cosmic tower. Earth sits in the middle, and above are the celestial spheres of the Devas, below the darker dimensions of the Asuras. Earth then is the battlefield, not metaphorically, literally, a stage where forces beyond human understanding play out their endless conflict, using us not just as spectators, but as participants, willingly or not. It's in these layers that the secrets start to twist into something colder, something that tugs at the edges of what we call real. The idea that we are not the top of the ladder, that above us, behind the sky, are beings who see us as we see ants, curious, maybe even amusing, but not equals, and every so often they return. Ancient temples aren't just shrines, they are runways, gateways, cosmic calculators. Many are aligned with uncanny precision to stars and planetary orbits. The ancient city of Dwarka, once thought to be myth, was found submerged under the sea. Its layout mirroring descriptions from the Mahabharata, including buildings that once housed beings who, by today's logic, should not have existed. And still, no one can explain how all of this was written down thousands of years before telescopes, before metallurgy, before science itself, unless it wasn't written down by men alone, unless it was remembered. There's something in the way these texts speak of knowledge not as discovery, but as something returned, given, forbidden, lost, and recovered. Over and over again, the story repeats. The gods come, they teach, we rise, and then we fall, and everything burns. In the dense green silence of the Yucatan, where stone pyramids rise like jagged teeth above the jungle canopy, it feels like the gods never really left. The air here is heavy with moisture and memory. Birds cry out from ancient trees. Somewhere in the stillness, there is always movement. Something watching, something waiting. This is the land of the feathered serpent. They called him Quetzalcoatl. To others, Kukulkan, a god unlike any other, neither warlord nor executioner, but bringer of knowledge, of peace, of light. He came not in fire, but in brilliance, not as a tyrant, but as a teacher. The stories don't speak of conquest. They speak of mathematics, astronomy, architecture, ethics. They speak of a being who walked among the people, wore no crown, but built cities, who spoke of the stars, the calendar, and the soul. His image appears again and again: feathers of a bird, coils of a serpent, sky and earth fused into one form, not just a symbol, a contradiction, a fusion, something that did not belong here yet did. Among the Maya, he was Kukulkan, serpent of the sky. Among the Toltecs, a man named Tse-Acatl Topiltzin bore his name and claimed his teachings. The Aztecs revered him, but also feared the prophecy that one day he would return from across the sea, pale-skinned, bearded, cloaked in power. Some said it was this prophecy that doomed Montezuma, who mistook a Spanish conquistador for the god reborn. But that's only the surface. The deeper story is older than any empire, and it begins with the stars. The pyramid at Chichen Itza, El Castillo, is more than stone. During the equinox, the setting sun casts a shadow down its steps that slithers like a serpent, perfectly aligned, perfectly timed, as if the temple itself breathes with the sky. This wasn't coincidence. The Maya didn't guess at the cosmos. They charted it. They tracked Venus with astonishing accuracy, knowing when it would rise and fall centuries into the future. Their calendar didn't just mark seasons, it marked epochs, gateways, ends, and beginnings. But where did that knowledge come from? The Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Maya, tells a story of creation that doesn't begin with success, but with failure. The gods tried to make humans from mud. They collapsed. They tried wood. These walked, but had no soul. Only when they used maize, sacred corn, did humanity take form. Not because it was edible, but because it was life. Even so, the gods saw a problem. These new beings were too perfect. They saw too clearly, knew too much. So, the gods clouded their vision, dimmed their awareness, a deliberate suppression, not punishment, control. The pattern returns again and again. Creation as utility, intelligence as risk, knowledge as something to be doled out in doses, not given freely, but measured like fire among dry leaves. Always the gods step in to dull our senses, not because we're evil, but because we were never meant to be equals. Even in myth, this struggle continues. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanca, descend into Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. They face trial after trial at the hands of dark lords who trick and kill. But the twins outwit them, and in death they ascend, become celestial bodies, become stars. The message is subtle, but powerful. Knowledge, courage, and cunning can break the cycle. Even the underworld cannot hold those who awaken. But not all the gods in these jungles were gentle. There were others. Those who demanded blood, demanded hearts, demanded fear. Gods of war, fire, and sacrifice. And yet, Quetzalcoatl rejected those practices. He forbade human sacrifice, taught instead of balance, of peace. For this, he was driven out, betrayed, banished, and as he left, he promised, "I will return." Some versions say he sailed east on a raft of snakes. Others say he flew. Always he vanished into the horizon and into prophecy. Who was he? Some say he was a king, a man, a visionary. But how does a man become a god to so many people across so many centuries in so many lands? And why do all their stories agree? Not just in what he taught, but how he looked, how he came, and that he will come again. In the great city of Teotihuacan, long abandoned even before the Aztecs arrived, there stands the temple of the feathered serpent. Beneath it, a sealed tunnel was discovered. Inside, pools of liquid mercury, golden orbs that seem to glow, walls coated in mica that reflect like starlight. A mirrored world underground, untouched for millennia. Was it a tomb, a ritual chamber, or something else entirely? Something built to communicate with forces not of this earth. No one knows who built Teotihuacan. It appeared fully formed, as if from nothing. Its avenues align with constellations. Its pyramids mirror Orion's belt, just like those in Egypt. Across the world, civilizations who supposedly never met somehow built cities to match the sky. And in those cities, they left stories not just of gods, but of sky beings, visitors, teachers, watchers, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Kukulkan. All of them came from the stars, and all of them left a promise behind. High above the dry plains of southern Peru, the earth is etched with lines too massive, too precise to make sense from the ground. Only from the sky, where humans didn't belong for most of history, do they reveal themselves. A hummingbird stretching its wings across 400 ft of desert, a spider with limbs curled into geometric perfection, a monkey, a tree, a man with arms raised to the sky. These are the Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs carved into the soil by removing the top layer of red rock, revealing a lighter clay beneath. They span across hundreds of square miles, like a language too big to read, too silent to forget. No one knows exactly why they were made. No bones have been found beside them. No temples, no altars, just lines that never fade. Some stretch for miles, long straight tracks that defy the rugged terrain, as if drawn by hand from above. And that's where the questions begin, because they weren't drawn from above. Not by the Nazca people, not with the tools we're told they had. No balloons, no towers, just wooden stakes and human feet. So why did they make something only the sky could understand? One theory says they were ritual pathways, routes walked by priests in ceremonies for rain, fertility, or celestial worship. Another suggests they formed a kind of astronomical map, their positions aligned with the rising and setting of stars. But some lines lead nowhere. They point into nothing. Some intersect at odd angles, running in directions that serve no earthly purpose. They are too clean, too deliberate, too impossible. In the 20th century, a controversial idea took hold. What if the lines weren't for humans at all? What if they were messages, not written in words but in form, shapes that could only be seen by those who flew? The lines began to look like landing strips, the animal's symbols, the humanoid figure with bulging eyes and one arm raised, nicknamed the astronaut, didn't look like anyone who lived in Peru 2,000 years ago. It looked like something else, something that once came down from the stars and might one day return. The man who made this theory famous, Erich von Däniken, wasn't a scientist. He wasn't trying to fit into archaeology. He was trying to break it. He suggested that ancient astronauts, beings from other worlds, had visited Earth in prehistory, guiding early civilizations, seeding technology, demanding tribute. The Nazca lines, he argued, were their runways, their signposts, their invitations. Skeptics pushed back hard. They pointed to experiments showing that a small team with ropes and stakes could reproduce the lines in just a few days. They reminded everyone that simple tools can do complex things. And they're right, they can. But what they can't explain is why. Why build these images so enormous, so perfect, and so pointless from the ground? Why aim them to the sky unless the sky had been watching? The Nazca weren't alone in this. Across the ocean, the Great Pyramids of Egypt align with Orion's belt. In Cambodia, the temples of Angkor mirror the constellation Draco. In England, Stonehenge marks the summer solstice with chilling accuracy. Everywhere, ancient cultures were obsessed with the sky, not as mystery, but as memory. The Nazca lived hard lives. The desert here is unforgiving. Water is scarce, the soil unkind. Yet they built aqueducts, created intricate pottery, charted the heavens. They saw gods in the stars, but perhaps not because they imagined them. Perhaps they remembered them. Perhaps the lines were a prayer, a plea, or a warning, something carved so deep into the earth that even time couldn't erase it. But there's another layer. Beneath the Nazca lines lies an older story, the Paracas culture, whose remains were found with elongated skulls, unlike anything seen in modern humans. The skulls were not just longer, they were shaped differently with internal differences that challenge the idea they were artificially deformed. Some researchers believe these were the original rulers of the region, beings set apart not by their crowns but by their biology. They were taller, their bones denser, their DNA strange. The Paracas also left behind art, geoglyphs of beings with round heads, large eyes, arms outstretched. One stands out above the rest, the owlman or the astronaut. He is carved into a hillside, his eyes wide and dark, his fingers long, his hand raised in a gesture that feels halfway between greeting and warning. Who was he? Why is he still there, staring up at a sky that's changed little in 2,000 years? In recent years, drones have uncovered even more figures. Some newly found, some so old they predate Nazca culture entirely. Felines, birds, humanoids with distorted limbs. Together they form a pattern that defies coincidence. Too much effort, too much scale, too much silence. The desert holds its secrets close. It doesn't explain itself. but the lines still glow in the sun, still speak to those who dare to look down from above. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they were never meant for those who walk. Maybe they were for those who soar. The first time you walk the Avenue of the Dead, it doesn't feel like ruins. It feels like a memory too large to fade. The stones are silent now, but once they rang with voices, once they shook beneath the weight of drums, of processions, of something not entirely human. The city is Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. The Aztecs gave it that name when they found it. Already ancient, already abandoned. They didn't know who had built it. They only knew it wasn't built by men. It stretches for miles, perfectly aligned to celestial movements. Pyramids rise at its center like frozen thunder, massive, angular, immutable. The Pyramid of the Sun is nearly the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Pyramid of the Moon mirrors the surrounding mountains so perfectly, it feels carved by the landscape itself. But the heart of it all, hidden at the end of the Grand Avenue, is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. And beneath that temple is a tunnel, a forgotten world sealed in darkness for 2,000 years. When archaeologists opened the tunnel, what they found didn't match any ritual or burial chamber ever seen. The floor was covered in liquid mercury, shimmering like a river of quicksilver. Golden orbs lay scattered like stars fallen to earth, made of pyrite, a material ancient cultures saw as a mirror to the divine. The walls had been treated with crushed mica, reflecting any light like the surface of a quiet lake. At the end of the tunnel, there was a chamber. Inside it, a miniature model of the world with hills, lakes, and cosmic symbols. It wasn't a grave, it was something else. A map, perhaps, a portal, a stage. And yet, no names were carved, no kings remembered, no gods claimed ownership. The people who built Teotihuacan left no records of themselves, no language, no signature, just scale and silence. How do you build a city that housed over 100,000 people with advanced irrigation, multi-level housing, obsidian tools sharper than surgical blades, and then vanish? Some say it was war, others blame famine, rebellion, or environmental collapse, but none of those explain the materials. The obsidian came from faraway volcanoes. The mica, an electrical insulator, was sourced from Brazil, thousands of miles away. It was placed carefully inside walls, especially in chambers with no apparent ceremonial use. Why? For what purpose? Mica doesn't make buildings prettier, but it does conduct, it does protect, it does reflect energy. Some researchers believe Teotihuacan wasn't just a city, it was a machine. A kind of ancient energy center harnessing Earth's natural frequencies. They point to the underground tunnels, the magnetic anomalies, the presence of mercury, a liquid metal associated with both electricity and transformation. Mercury was sacred, volatile, untouchable. Why pour it beneath the temple of the feathered serpent unless it served a function no one speaks of anymore? There's something else, something stranger. Teotihuacan's layout mirrors the Orion constellation, just like the pyramids in Egypt. This couldn't have been coincidence. Civilizations oceans apart, never said to have met, drawing the same patterns on the ground to echo the same stars above. It's as if they remembered something older than borders, a map not of Earth, but of the heavens. The Avenue of the Dead itself runs in perfect alignment, not with magnetic north, but with the setting of a specific star on a specific day in a specific year. It's a clock so precise it goes unnoticed. You don't see time in stone until you understand the stars that shape it. But the gods who walked this avenue, where did they go? The Aztecs believed they were real. They said Quetzalcoatl once ruled here before his exile, that he taught men how to live, how to create, how to rise. But when he left, something changed. The city emptied, the temples darkened, and for centuries, no one dared to enter. Even today, walking through Teotihuacan feels like trespassing. The wind slips between stones too large to have been moved by the hands of those who lived without the wheel. The sun reflects off walls built with a geometry no one teaches anymore. The echoes don't sound like echoes. They sound like voices being held just below the surface of sound. Whoever built this place did so with a purpose that modern minds have only started to guess at. Maybe it was a sanctuary, a control center, a school. Or maybe it was something far more humbling, a remnant, a leftover from a time when humans didn't rule the earth, but served those who did. And perhaps buried beneath the dust, sealed behind the walls of mica and pools of mercury, is something that still waits, not forgotten, just sleeping. There's a book that's not in most Bibles, not banned exactly, just quietly set aside, as if someone decided long ago that its words were too unsettling, too strange. The Book of Enoch, it reads like a secret history of heaven's greatest mistake. Not just angels with wings and harps, but watchers, celestial beings sent to observe humanity, only to fall from their post in a way that would echo through every myth that came after. They didn't come in fire, they came in silence. 200 of them descending not onto a battlefield, but a mountain. Mount Hermon, a real place, still standing, still cold. There they made a pact, not with men, but with each other. Their leader, Samyaza, feared what was coming. He knew the risk. He worried he would be blamed alone, so he made them all swear the same oath, binding them in rebellion. Their crime wasn't war, it was love, or something that looked like it. They took human women as wives, not as symbols, not as stories, as real people. And from these unions came something else, something the world had never seen before and wasn't meant to see again. The Nephilim, the giants, the hybrids. They weren't just tall, they weren't just strong, they were insatiable. The Book of Enoch describes them in horrifying clarity. They devoured the crops, then the animals, then the people. Their hunger knew no boundary. They were part God, part man, part anomaly. And the world began to tear itself apart, trying to feed them, but it didn't end there. The Watchers didn't just share their bodies, they shared their minds. They taught humans things they weren't supposed to know. How to forge metal, how to craft weapons, how to read the stars, not as stories, but as machines. Azazel, one of the most infamous, taught the secrets of war. Others taught enchantments, astrology, cosmetics, the kind of knowledge that shapes civilizations and destroys them. What they gave us changed everything. Power without the wisdom to carry it, fire without the shelter to hold it. Humanity was still young, still waking up, and suddenly we were wide awake with tools that could wound the sky. That's when the cries rose. The Book of Enoch says, humanity began to scream, not just in pain, but in confusion, and heaven heard. The great archangels were sent not to teach, not to forgive, but to bind. Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, names that echo in nearly every religion, were given one command. End this. They hunted the Watchers, chained them in the depths of the earth, far beneath the mountains and oceans. Samyaza was cast into darkness. Azazel was buried in the desert beneath jagged stones. The Nephilim turned on each other in madness, driven to war by their own creators, and still it wasn't enough. So a flood was sent, not as cleansing, but as reset. Not because humanity had sinned, but because something unnatural had been introduced into the world, and it had to be erased. The Great Flood didn't begin in the Bible. It's here in Enoch in its original fury, not rain and salvation, but water as a scalpel, cutting away what was never meant to live. And still, some survived. Not all the Watchers were caught. Not all the Nephilim were destroyed. Their traces lingered in the myths of giants that walked the land, in the ruins built with stones too large for human hands, in the whispers of bloodlines said to carry divine traits. The memory of them was buried. Yes, but not forgotten. The strange thing is, this story doesn't live only in Enoch. In Mesopotamia, the Apkallu were semi-divine sages who brought knowledge, then were cast down for overstepping. In Greece, the Titans gave fire to man and were punished with eternal torment. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent brought wisdom and was driven away. Over and over the pattern returns. Beings from the sky, a gift of forbidden knowledge, a punishment that remakes the world. But the Book of Enoch offers something rare, a witness. Enoch himself wasn't just a prophet. He was taken, not killed, taken, lifted into the heavens by radiant beings, escorted through realms no human was meant to see. He was shown the machinery behind the sun and the moon, the storehouses of wind and snow, the prisons of stars, and the halls where the deeds of men were recorded. He saw beings with too many wings, voices like thunder, faces that could not be described without bending language. And he was changed, transformed. No longer mortal, he returned to Earth not as a man, but as something else, something in between. Some believe this was just metaphor, a dream, a vision, but others hear a different story, one that feels almost modern. The details, being taken by radiant figures, shown impossible technology, returned with knowledge, and altered biology, sound eerily like the accounts we now call alien abductions. Enoch, they say, might have been the first, and then the book ends quietly, cut off, lost to time, excluded from the canon, buried. But the memory remains in the stories of watchers who defied the stars, of giants who walked the earth, of a flood that wasn't divine wrath, but a containment measure, and of a man who left the world as we know it, only to return with secrets no one was ready to hear. They said the flood washed it all away, that the giants were gone, the watchers buried, the world made clean, but some stains don't lift with water, some lineages run too deep. And when the new age began, when kings returned and temples rose again, the stories didn't start fresh. They picked up right where they left off with the belief that certain blood was not like the rest, that some men were born not from clay and breath, but from a spark left behind by beings who had once ruled the earth. You see it first in Sumer. The king list doesn't begin with men, it begins with gods. It states plainly without apology, when kingship descended from heaven, it was at Eridu. The first rulers were not chosen by people, they were appointed from above. Some ruled for hundreds of years, some for thousands. These weren't allegories. These were timelines, legacies, reigns carved into stone, listing names that echoed across generations. Alulim, Dumuzid, and Menluana. Their rule came before the flood, before history, before us. In Egypt, the pattern sharpened. Pharaohs weren't just divine by title, they were divine by birth. Every successor was said to carry within him the blood of the gods, descendants of Ra, Horus, Osiris, not metaphors, bloodlines. The idea wasn't spiritual, it was anatomical. It meant that ruling wasn't a right, it was a condition, and if you didn't carry the blood, you couldn't wear the crown. The murals confirm it. Pharaohs depicted with elongated skulls, wide eyes, narrow jaws. The carvings show them seated beside gods as equals, not subjects. In the pyramid texts, there are passages describing the king's soul returning not to earth, but to the stars, specifically to Orion, to Sirius, to places that shine in the night like memory. When the pharaoh died, he didn't just die, he ascended home. But it wasn't just in the art, it was in the bodies. The mummified remains of some royal figures show cranial structures that push beyond natural variation. Not all, but enough to raise questions. The volume of the skulls, the absence of suture marks in some cases, the symmetry. These aren't accidents of birth or the result of head binding. Some researchers argue they point to something else, something not quite human, or perhaps not entirely. In Peru, the same skulls appear. The Paracas people, long before the Inca, left behind bones that don't match those of neighboring tribes. Their DNA has shown anomalies, their mitochondrial lines traced to no known region, and again, the art, beings with wide eyes, tall heads, long limbs, always looking up, always reaching skyward. The belief in divine ancestry spread across the world like a forgotten inheritance. In the Americas, ruling dynasties claimed descent from gods who came down in serpentine form. In China, the first emperors were said to be sons of the dragon, a symbol not of fire, but of stars. In Japan, the imperial line traces back to Amaterasu, the sun goddess. In Africa, the Dogon speak of the Nomo, beings from Sirius who seeded life and gave birth to rulers of wisdom and vision, and all of them shared the same idea that the first leaders weren't elected, they were remembered. There is power in that belief. It reshapes society. It turns blood into law, and more importantly, it preserves a story, a whisper that whatever ruled before the flood didn't die. It bred. Some of these rulers were said to live lives twice as long as common men. Their skin bore symbols. Their eyes didn't blink the same way. They possessed knowledge beyond their time, astrology, medicine, metallurgy. But their greatest trait wasn't strength or intellect. It was separation. They were not us. And that distinction passed down through generation after generation, became sacred, protected, hidden. In medieval Europe, the myth of the divine right of kings emerged, not as a political philosophy, but as a spiritual necessity. Kings ruled because God had placed them there. Their blood was different, their minds chosen, their lineage set apart by heaven. But peel back the language, and you find the same bones as in Egypt, in Sumer, in Peru. Not divine approval, divine ancestry, as if something older was being echoed beneath layers of culture and time. There are those who believe that the Nephilim never vanished, that their blood was diluted, yes, but not destroyed. That it still exists, hidden behind royal lineages, ancient priesthoods, secret societies, That their presence explains the obsession with genealogy, with blood purity, with heirlooms and chosen ones. The idea isn't just that some people are special. The idea is that some people aren't entirely people. And maybe that's why, when you look closely at the oldest temples, the deepest tombs, the highest thrones, you find the same symbols again and again. The stars, the serpents, the gods descending, and the kings who welcomed them not as strangers, but as family. You don't have to believe in ancient astronauts to know something doesn't add up. You just have to look not at the myths, at the math, at the stone blocks fitted so tightly together that even a razor blade can't slip between them, at megaliths weighing hundreds of tons, quarried from mountains miles away and somehow transported without the wheel, at ruins aligned perfectly with constellations only visible during specific epochs, as if the builders weren't just looking at the stars, but remembering them. Across the earth, there are structures that speak a language of precision we still can't fully translate. The Great Pyramid of Giza isn't just massive, it's almost impossible. Its base is level within less than an inch. Its sides point almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. It encodes pi, phi, and the dimensions of the earth. Mainstream historians call it a tomb, but there's no body, no inscriptions, no treasures, just silence and geometry. Vast, unyielding, deliberate. Then there's Baalbek in Lebanon. The Temple of Jupiter stands on a platform built with stones so large they make modern cranes look laughable. One stone alone, the stone of the pregnant woman, weighs over 1,000 tons. We still don't know how they moved it. We don't even know why they used it when smaller stones would have worked. Unless the size wasn't an accident, unless it was necessary for something we no longer understand. In South America at Sacsayhuaman near Cusco, stones the size of trucks are shaped like puzzle pieces and locked together without mortar. They weren't stacked. They were sculpted to interlock in 3 dimensions, surviving earthquakes that have flattened nearby cities. These aren't rough piles. They're engineered defenses, or perhaps interfaces. Some believe these sites aren't just architectural, they're technological. Scattered throughout these ruins, strange materials appear. Mica, for example, in Teotihuacan, used as insulation today in electronics. But what was it insulating 2,000 years ago? In the same city, pools of liquid mercury were found beneath temples. It's toxic, volatile, reflective, and conducts energy. The ancient Chinese used it in imperial tombs. The Vedic texts describe it as a fuel for vimanas, flying craft powered by mercury vortex engines. Even stranger are the out-of-place artifacts, a small gear found in a Greek shipwreck, now called the Antikythera mechanism. Over 2,000 years old, it tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with a complexity unseen again until the 18th century. No one knows who made it or how. And then there are the legends. Some call them metaphors, others call them memories. Stories of cities that glowed with their own light, temples that sang when entered, floating palaces, weapons that could split the sky, scrolls that recorded every vibration of the earth. We find references to these not in science fiction, but in sacred texts, the Mahabharata, the Book of Enoch, the Pyramid texts. They don't describe superstition, they describe machines. The deeper you look, the more it begins to feel like these ancient cultures weren't inventing myths. They were trying to preserve something, a memory of a time when humanity lived beside or beneath something greater, something that had mastered energy, resonance, structure, gravity, something that built not for decades, but for millennia. Perhaps the greatest evidence isn't in what was built, but what was lost. Civilizations rose with knowledge they shouldn't have had, then fell without passing it on. The Indus Valley people had grid-based cities, indoor plumbing, and accurate weights and measures, and then gone. No epic war, no great migration, just silence. The Olmec carved colossal stone heads with features no one can trace to their own population, then vanished. The Minoans built complex palaces with running water and multi-story buildings and disappeared almost overnight. Each time knowledge appears out of nowhere, burns bright, then vanishes like a match in the wind. It makes you wonder, were these civilizations discovering these ideas or remembering them? And if they were remembering, who gave them something to remember in the first place? There are those who believe that this was the true legacy of the gods, not just their bloodlines or their laws, but their tools. That what we now call myth was once science. That what we call magic was once technology. and that the monuments left behind are not just shrines but machines waiting for us to become smart enough or humble enough to use them again. In the heart of ancient India, woven into verses older than most languages still spoken today, there is a war that feels too real to be metaphor. The Mahabharata, an epic of gods and men, brothers and betrayal, loyalty and destruction. But somewhere deep within its winding stanzas, beneath the poetry and the parables, something else flickers through. Something sharper, louder, and more familiar than it should be. Not swords, not arrows. Something closer to missiles, blinding explosions. Descriptions of destruction so total they don't sound like mythology. They sound like war reports. The text speaks of a single weapon, not cast from bronze or shaped by hammer, but summoned. A weapon charged with all the power of the universe. It says it created a pillar of fire and smoke, rising as if 1,000 suns had burst at once. The blast incinerated everything. Soldiers and horses were reduced to ash. Trees caught fire. The earth trembled. Animals fled in panic. Food turned poisonous. Hair and nails fell from bodies. Survivors, if there were any, wandered blindly in madness. It didn't just kill, it contaminated. You can read that and say, metaphor, hyperbole, ancient storytelling at its most dramatic. Or you can read it again and ask, why does it sound so much like Hiroshima? Even the Sanskrit word used, Brahmastra, refers to a divine weapon of massive, unstoppable power granted by the gods to a chosen warrior. It required incantations to deploy, precision to aim, and once unleashed, it couldn't be recalled. It was not just a tool of war, it was finality incarnate. Its description mirrors what we now call a tactical nuke. Blast radius, radiation, aftermath. Some scholars argue the Mahabharata was meant as spiritual allegory, but others point to something more unsettling. What if it wasn't an allegory? What if it was memory? In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great cities of the Indus Valley civilization, skeletal remains have been found lying in the streets, hand in hand as if caught by something sudden. Some show signs of exposure to intense heat, enough to fuse stone, vitrify walls, and leave a layer of radioactive ash. Mainstream archaeology points to invasion or natural disaster, but no weapons were found, no signs of burning by conventional means, just the mark of energy. Heat so intense it doesn't scorch, it transforms. In a city without known enemies, without evidence of war, what could do that? The Mahabharata describes more than one such weapon. There were others. Projectiles that roared with thunder, released brilliant flashes, and chased targets with terrifying accuracy. One created a fire with the power of the sun. Another turned the ocean to steam. The wars weren't between mere men. They were between gods, or beings worshipped as gods, the Devas and Asuras. Two factions not of good and evil, but of power and ideology, order and rebellion, structure and chaos. Their weapons weren't cast in forges, they were built with a different kind of knowledge, one that seems far too modern for its time. And they didn't fight for land or gold, they fought for control of Earth's realms, both physical and spiritual. In the Mahabharata, Earth isn't just a world, it's a node, a center point between planes of existence. A battleground, not because of what it is, but because of where it is. Vimanas, the flying crafts described in vivid detail in Vedic texts, appear again in these wars. They're not chariots of the clouds, they're machines. Some move in all directions, some change shape mid-flight, some vanish entirely. They're used in battle, in transport, in surveillance. The Vaimanika Shastra, a text from the early 20th century said to be based on ancient sources, outlines propulsion methods, materials, energy systems, mercury engines, gyroscopic stabilization, anti-gravity, terms that sound eerily close to what's now being whispered in military labs and declassified documents. If this is invention, it's uncannily accurate. If it's memory, it's terrifying. Because if these weapons existed once, if some form of high-energy warfare played out in Earth's distant past, it changes everything. It means we've been here before, on the brink, past it even. And what we call the beginning of civilization may have been the recovery phase, the rebuilding, the reset. Some researchers argue that the Mahabharata doesn't recount one war, but many. Echoes of older battles compiled into a single epic, a cultural black box preserving data through myth, passed down through generations who no longer understood the technology but remembered its consequences. Fire from the sky, cities turned to ash, silence that lingered for generations. It also reframes the gods themselves. Perhaps they weren't omnipotent creators. Perhaps they were survivors, soldiers, engineers, astronauts, or something in between. Perhaps their greatest weapon wasn't destruction, but erasure, leaving behind just enough legend to explain the wounds in the earth, but not enough to understand how to make the weapons again. Yet, here we are. We've split the atom. We've built satellites. We've placed machines on other planets. And in the shadow of our own Mahabharatas, our own wars and warnings, we stand on a similar edge. Maybe the cycle is natural. Maybe the gods didn't leave. Maybe they're waiting to see if we remember what they tried to bury beneath myth and dust. The jungles of Mesoamerica do not speak in words, but in stone. They whisper through pyramid steps, through the precise shadows cast on equinoxes, through glyphs etched into the walls of cities swallowed by time. They tell of gods who came not to take but to give, who arrived from the heavens bearing knowledge, order, and light. Among them none shine brighter than the feathered serpent, Kukulkan to the Maya, Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs, a god of wind, sky, stars, and return. He wasn't like the others. While blood rituals soaked altars in the names of warlike deities, Quetzalcoatl rejected sacrifice. He brought calendars, architecture, astronomy. Where others demanded flesh, he offered insight. Where others ruled with fear, he built with precision. And he left with a promise that one day across the sea, he would come back. In the city of Chichen Itza, the Great Pyramid of El Castillo stands like a riddle in stone. During the spring and fall equinoxes, the setting sun carves a serpent of shadow that slithers down the steps, ending at the head of a carved snake resting at the base. It isn't decoration, it's a living mechanism, a calendar, a signal, as if the monument itself is keeping time for someone to return. The belief in this return ran so deep that when strange ships appeared on the horizon centuries later, some said the prophecy had come true. Pale-skinned, bearded men wearing armor stepped onto the shore. Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors, Montezuma, the last emperor of the Aztecs, didn't order his armies to attack. He waited. He listened. He believed for a time that Quetzalcoatl had come back to fulfill his promise. But the return didn't bring light. It brought fire, disease, collapse. Historians debate whether Montezuma truly believed Cortés was a god. It may have been a later invention, a justification for conquest. But the myth was already there, older than the empire, older than the stones, and its power was real enough to shape decisions, to shape destiny. But who or what was Quetzalcoatl? The earliest depictions from Olmec and Toltec cultures show a serpent adorned with feathers, sky, and earth woven into one being. He's not just a god of the wind, he's a symbol of transformation, the bridge between physical and divine. Many myths describe him as descending from the stars. Some describe him walking among men. Others say he vanished across the ocean, sailing east on a raft made of snakes. But all agree he will return. The parallels are impossible to ignore. A sky being, a teacher, a builder, a bringer of order who eventually withdraws, promising to come back. It's the same narrative that appears in Egypt, in Sumer, in India. Gods not living in the sky, but arriving from it, and each one tied to specific celestial markers: Venus, Orion, Sirius. Quetzalcoatl too is linked to Venus. The morning star, the evening wanderer, a planet associated across cultures with rebirth, destruction, and divine presence. The Maya tracked Venus with mind-bending precision. They knew its cycle down to the day. Their long count calendar, which famously ended a great cycle in 2012, was not the invention of dreamers. It was the legacy of astronomers whose knowledge rivals ours even now, and they tied it to the return of gods. It was never about the end of the world. It was about a doorway. In the great abandoned city of Teotihuacan, long before the Aztecs arrived, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stood at the heart of a place said to be where the gods were born. It is one of the most precise, most complex structures on the continent. Beneath it, as we've seen, lies a tunnel filled with mercury, gold spheres, and walls that reflect light like stars trapped underground. What kind of temple needs liquid metal flowing beneath it? What kind of altar glows? Some researchers believe it wasn't a temple at all. It was a beacon, a portal, a machine. And the serpent that ruled it wasn't mythological. He was mechanical, biological, extraordinary, a being remembered as divine, not because he demanded worship, but because he stood so far beyond the comprehension of those who saw him. Across South and Central America, the pattern repeats. In Peru, Viracocha emerges from the sea to build civilization before vanishing into the sky. In Guatemala, sky gods teach agriculture and writing. In every story, the arc is the same. They came, they built, they left, and always they promised to come again. But the question remains, who were they? Were they visitors from another world, remnants of a lost human civilization more advanced than we can imagine, or something else entirely? What we do know is this: the civilizations that worship them reached extraordinary heights of mathematics, architecture, astronomy, and then fell, not once, repeatedly, always in cycles, always leaving behind clues so advanced, so aligned with the stars that they whisper of knowledge not rediscovered until now. Maybe the gods never meant to rule. Maybe they were just here to teach. But when they left, their absence became a wound, a silence so vast it demanded to be filled with faith, with ritual, with blood. And when the wrong beings came claiming to be gods, the people let them in because they remembered. The Nazca Desert doesn't move, it doesn't erode, it doesn't forget. For centuries, it has kept its secrets, preserved beneath a thin crust of oxidized stone, untouched by rain, wind, or time. And drawn across it, like scars or messages or invitations, are the geoglyphs. They are too large to recognize on foot, too perfect to be random. A hummingbird stretching the length of a football field, a spider with coiled legs drawn in a single unbroken line, a monkey, a whale, a man with an oversized head, one arm raised towards the sky as if waving or signaling. These figures aren't new. They've been here for over 2,500 years, but we've only seen them clearly since we gained the power of flight. Before planes, they were invisible, meaningless. Only when humans took to the sky did the shapes emerge from the dust like something waking up. That alone should unsettle us. These weren't made to be seen from the ground, which raises a question that won't go away. Who were they made for? Conventional theories suggest they were ritual paths walked by priests during rain ceremonies. Others argue they formed part of an ancient astronomical calendar. Some lines align with solstices, equinoxes, or the rise of specific stars. But many of them point to nowhere, vanishing across the desert, perfectly straight, stretching miles into nothing. They weren't accidental. They weren't rough sketches in the sand. They were carved with purpose, and they were meant to be seen from the sky. In the 20th century, when aerial photography revealed the full scope of the geoglyphs, a different theory took shape. What if they were never meant for human eyes? What if they were messages, not prayers, but coordinates, landing strips, communication symbols? What if the Nazca lines weren't created for gods to admire from Olympus, but for visitors to recognize from orbit? It sounds like science fiction, but then you walk the desert. You stand at the base of a line so long and so straight, it defies topography. You realize that creating it required not just patience, but knowledge of angles, proportions, distances, of geometry at a scale no human had reason to consider, unless they were addressing something beyond themselves. And then you look at the owl man, or the astronaut as some call him, a bulbous head, oversized eyes, limbs out of proportion with the rest of the figure. He doesn't look like any deity worshipped in known Nazca tradition. He doesn't look human. He looks like something seen once, remembered poorly, drawn with reverence and confusion, one hand raised to the heavens, not supplication, recognition. Nearby, other geoglyphs have emerged in recent years thanks to drones and satellite scans. Felines, birds, humanoids. Many are older than the Nazca culture itself, stretching back to the Paracas civilization. Their artwork often features figures with elongated skulls, round eyes, strange proportions. The connection isn't clear, but it's consistent. Different cultures, same imagery, same direction upward. Skeptics point out that these designs could have been made with simple tools, and they're right. Wooden stakes, ropes, manpower, it's all possible. But that's not the mystery. The mystery isn't how the Nazca lines were made, it's why. Why draw figures so massive you'd never see them unless you could fly? Why cover miles of desert with shapes no one would ever fully view in their lifetime unless they weren't for the people who made them? Some researchers believe the lines are part of a larger pattern, one connected to ancient flight. They point to myths across South America that speak of sky beings, flying serpents, gods who descended in brilliant machines. The Incas told of Viracocha, the creator god who wore robes that shimmered like the sun and could rise into the sky. The Wari before them told of beings who rode the clouds. The Nazca had their own stories of spirits who lived in the mountains and controlled the rain, descending only when properly honored. What if those weren't metaphors? What if they were descriptions filtered through memory and worship of something real, something that came down from the stars, made contact, then left again, but not before promising to return? And what if the Nazca lines were their way of marking the landing zone? It sounds impossible, but the more you examine the desert, the harder it is to explain away. Some of the straight lines are up to 10 miles long and perfectly level. Others intersect at right angles, like grid lines, like targeting markers. Some glyphs have no obvious cultural function, no known religious significance. They don't relate to crops or seasons. They just exist, beautiful, bizarre, and undeniable. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they weren't meant to convey meaning. Maybe they were meant to be recognized, like a beacon, like a message left for the sky. We remember you. We are ready. Or maybe they were never messages at all. Maybe they were warnings. Because in stories passed down quietly by local shamans, there are whispers not just of visitors, but of punishments, of times when the sky opened and people vanished, of fields turned to ash, of knowledge given and then taken away, of beings who came with light but cast long shadows. If so, then the Nazca lines are not just symbols of hope or worship, they are scars. The jungle has reclaimed the cities now. Roots split stone, vines climb the broken steps of once sacred pyramids, rain and wind whisper through crumbling temples, but the silence is only skin deep. Beneath the moss, beneath the carved glyphs and shattered altars, lies something else, a pulse, a rhythm, the heartbeat of a civilization that once mapped time itself. The Maya weren't guessing. Their calendars didn't just mark solstices or seasons. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance. They charted Venus with mind-numbing accuracy. They calculated lunar cycles, planetary alignments, and cosmic shifts with numbers so large they boggle modern comprehension. Their long count calendar tracked more than years. It tracked epochs, eras of creation and destruction, civilizations rising and falling, not by fate, but by design. And that's where the question begins. How? How did a people without telescopes or computers understand orbital mechanics? How did they build a calendar that spanned over 5,000 years down to the day and embed it into architecture, into staircases, doorways, shadows? The official answer is observation, patience, trial, and error. But it feels like more than that. It feels like remembrance. In their most sacred book, the Popol Vuh, the Maya describe how the gods tried to create humans first from mud, then from wood. These early versions failed. They were too weak, too hollow, too indifferent. Only when the gods shaped humans from maize, sacred corn, did they succeed. But then, a mistake. The new humans were too perfect. Their sight was too sharp, their minds too clear, so the gods intervened again. They dimmed their vision, clouded their understanding, blinded them to the fullness of their origins. What kind of gods make their creation dumber? Unless the purpose was control, unless the intelligence was a threat. That one myth carries within it a chilling idea that we, as we are now, are not what we were meant to be. That something once created us more complete, and something else took that away. Not as punishment, as precaution. And yet fragments remained, not in our minds, but in our measurements. The Maya built pyramids aligned with specific stars, cities laid out to mirror constellations, ball courts that echoed not just sound, but mathematical ratios. At Chichen Itza, the Temple of Kukulkan marks the equinox with a serpent of shadow that slithers down its steps. At Copan and Tikal, observatories track the heavens with eerie precision. These weren't just sacred spaces, they were instruments, timers, devices made of stone. And still, the Maya spoke not just of time, but of its end, not in fire, not in flood. In return, they believed we live in cycles, that this current era, this world is not the first, that others came before and ended, and that each time it wasn't random. It was scheduled, reset by something greater. The long count calendar ended a great cycle in 2012, not the end of the world, but the end of an age. A cosmic gear turning, clicking into place. But what was it counting down to? Some say it was only myth, a calendar reaching the end of its page. But for the Maya, time wasn't linear. It was layered, recursive, a spiral, not a line. And the end of one cycle didn't mean death, it meant activation. Modern astronomers have confirmed that certain celestial events tied to the 2012 date, such as the alignment of the Earth, Sun, and the galactic center, did indeed occur. Not symbolically, physically. The galaxy itself turned, and we were positioned directly in line with its dense glowing heart. And the Maya knew that before telescopes, before satellites, before science had words for it. So again, how? Some researchers suggest they didn't discover this knowledge. They inherited it, that it was passed down not in books, but in memory, or in myth, or perhaps given by those who once came from the sky, as so many Mesoamerican myths say, beings who walked beside man, who carried knowledge not weapons, who taught us how to count stars and mark seasons. Because for them time wasn't mystery, it was architecture. And when they left, they didn't just vanish. They left blueprints behind in stone, in story, in numbers so large and so exact, they still feel alien, like a message encoded into our past, waiting to be read again once we were finally ready. And maybe we're ready now because we've built machines to track the cosmos, and we find what they found. We've sent signals into space, and we wonder who might answer. And we've started to suspect deep in the quiet spaces of our science that time itself is not what we thought it was. Perhaps that's what the Maya were trying to tell us. Not when the world would end, but when the illusion would crack, when the spiral would begin to bend, and when something older would return, not to destroy, but to remind. The red rocks of the Arizona desert hold their silence well. They've seen empires rise, wither, and vanish beneath the wind. They've watched the stars shift overhead, slowly, predictably, like the ticking of a galactic clock. And through it all, the Hopi people have remained. Keepers of a story so old, it predates pyramids, predates kings, predates written language. A story they say was given to them by the star people. They don't call them aliens. They don't call them gods. The Hopi use the word kachinas, beings of light, of wisdom, of sky. Some lived among the people, some only visited. Some came in radiant ships shaped like shields moving without sound. Others walked on foot, tall and strange, wearing what seemed like helmets and suits that sparkled in sunlight. They taught the Hopi how to grow food, how to live in balance, how to honor the earth and the sky as one system, an ecosystem of spirit and matter. But their most haunting gift wasn't farming, it was knowledge of time, of cycles, of destruction. According to the Hopi, we are living in the fourth world. There were three before this, each one rising from the ashes of the last, not by accident, not by natural disaster, but by purification. They say the first world was destroyed by fire, the second by ice, the third by flood. Each time only a few survived, those who followed the instructions of the Kachinas and took shelter underground in vast caverns, protected from the fury above. The Hopi say the next purification is coming. And when it does, it won't just be the end of a world. It will be the arrival of something new, something remembered or warned about. One part of their prophecy stands out like a flare in the sky, the blue star, Kachina. They say one day a blue star will appear visible to all dancing in the sky. It will mark the beginning of the end. After that, the Kachinas will return. The earth will tremble. Fire will rise, and only those who keep the ancient ways, those in harmony with the land, the stars, and the old truths will pass through the purification and enter the fifth world. It's not metaphor to them, it's memory. Some believe this blue star could be a comet. Others suggest it's a celestial object not yet discovered. But in recent years, strange events have sparked renewed interest. A rise in UFO sightings, a sharp increase in solar activity, and a growing awareness, even in scientific communities, that space is not a quiet place. But for the Hopi, the signs aren't only in the heavens, they're on Earth. They speak of a dwelling place in the sky that will fall, something large, man-made, crashing down with fire. Some interpret this as a space station, others as a satellite. Either way, it's something built by us, returning the way it came, a harbinger, a message. And what happens after that? The prophecy speaks of sanctuaries, underground cities, safe zones beneath the earth, protected not by technology, but by resonance, sacred frequencies, prayers, balance. The Hopi believe their ancestors were led to these places by the star people during past cataclysms. The entrances were hidden afterward, sealed, waiting. They also speak of the true white brother, a being from the stars, or perhaps a bloodline left behind who will return when the world stands on the edge. He will judge humanity not through wrath, but through truth. Those who have kept the sacred ways will follow him into the fifth world. The rest will remain behind. The idea isn't punishment, it's reset. The Hopi aren't the only ones with this pattern. The Dogon of Mali speak of visitors from Sirius who arrived with thunder and light. The Zuni tell of ancestors who emerged from underground after a world-ending flood. The Lakota talk of star relatives who gifted them knowledge before retreating to the sky. Different names, same rhythm. Arrival, teaching, withdrawal, return. There are places in the Southwest where rock paintings show figures that don't look human. Round heads, large eyes, glowing halos. Some have no mouths, some stand beside symbols that resemble stars or strange flying craft. The Wandjina in Australia look eerily similar. So do the petroglyphs of the Cayenne, the Anasazi, the Hohokam. All of them seem to be remembering the same visitors, and all of them hint that those visitors weren't finished. Today, Hopi elders still speak softly of the signs. They say many have already passed. The invention of roads in the sky, the spread of iron snakes across the land, the poisoning of the earth and the waters, the distortion of the family, the loss of the sacred. But not all hope is gone, because the Hopi believe this is not a story of doom. It's a story of preparation. And those who listen, truly listen, might still hear the whisper of the kachinas on the wind, feel the pulse of the earth beneath the canyons, see the stars not as distant lights, but as old friends returning. In the dry, sun-scorched lands of Mali, among rocky outcrops and scattered villages, live the Dogon, farmers, star watchers, storytellers. At first glance, their way of life appears simple, rhythmic, earthy, rooted. But beneath the woven fabric of their daily lives is a narrative that doesn't belong here. It's too vast, too precise, too impossible to have been born in isolation. It speaks of visitors from the stars, of beings called the Nomo. The Dogon say the Nomo came from Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, but not just from Sirius A, the one we can see with our eyes. From Sirius B, its companion star, a star that is invisible without advanced telescopes, a star that wasn't even confirmed by Western astronomers until the 19th century. Yet, the Dogon knew about it. They knew it was small, dense, and white, that it orbited Sirius A in a 50-year cycle. They knew things they should not have known. According to their oral tradition, the Nomo descended from the sky in a spinning vessel that landed with fire and thunder. They weren't gods, not exactly. They were teachers, part fish, part human, semi-amphibious. They emerged from water and shared knowledge about the stars, the planets, the soul, the structure of life. They brought the first language. They introduced agriculture. They created order from chaos. The Dogon's most sacred ceremonies revolve around this legacy. Their symbolism is rich with spirals, circles, and star clusters, particularly Sirius. They describe it not as a single star, but a system. They say there is a third star, Sirius C, still unconfirmed by science, but the Dogon believe it is real. Their stories remain unchanged. Critics argue that this knowledge must have come from European explorers, perhaps whispered during colonial contact, but anthropologists who lived with the Dogon for decades reported otherwise. The information was already embedded in their cosmology, passed down through generations, encoded in ritual and symbol. It wasn't borrowed, it was preserved. The Nomo, they say, weren't simply visitors, they were guardians. They came to repair what had been broken. They came after a fall, after a disruption in the cosmic order. Some believe they were part of a cycle like the Kachinas of the Hopi, the Anunnaki of Sumer, the Neteru of Egypt. Beings from beyond returning not in conquest but in response, to correct, to recalibrate. The Dogon's creation story describes the universe as being born from a cosmic egg. Within it spun twin spirits, one of which broke the sacred order by acting before the appointed time. That one was cast down. The Nomo, the obedient twin, was sent to restore balance. He sacrificed himself, dismembered his body, and scattered it across the universe to seed life, to encode truth, to bring form back to a fractured world. It is a myth, but it is also a pattern. Everywhere we look in every ancient culture, there is the tale of beings who came down from the stars, often after a great disruption, who gave knowledge not conquest, who lived among us or above us, who promised to return when the balance once again tipped too far. And the Dogon didn't just remember the stars. They remembered structures, the design of Sirius B, the shape of its orbit, the density of its form. They described it as the heaviest thing in the sky, which is true. Sirius B is a white dwarf, a collapsed star so dense that a teaspoon of it would weigh tons. How did they know that? Why did they care? Unless it was more than trivia, unless it was instruction. Perhaps the Nomo didn't just bring teachings. Perhaps they left markers, triggers for memory. Perhaps the Dogon weren't preserving a myth, but safeguarding a warning or a key. There are ceremonies still performed even today in Dogon lands that seem to reenact descent from the stars. Masks shaped like fish, dances that mimic orbital patterns, spiral pathways traced in sand like trajectories. They say these are rituals of respect, of remembrance. But perhaps they're more than that. Perhaps they are rehearsals for something that once happened, for something that may happen again, and they are not alone. From the Aborigines in Australia to the Zulu in South Africa, there are stories of sky people, of beings who came down in bright vessels, shared their gifts, and left when the world grew too noisy, too divided, too blind. But they always leave behind one thing: the promise to return. When the signs align, when the earth is ready, or when it is once again on the verge of collapse. The Dogon believe that time is not linear like the Maya, like the Hindus. They believe in recurrence, in spirals. They believe that knowledge must be rediscovered in stages as we become mature enough to hold it again. That's why they don't shout their secrets. They guard them. They bury them in symbolism, in initiation, in story, because the truth once known is dangerous. And maybe that's what the Nomo understood. Maybe that's why they left, not to abandon us, but to give us space to remember on our own, to see the stars not as distant lights, but as homes, as family, as history. In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, the rocks breathe stories. They don't whisper them, they display them. On cliff walls and cave ceilings, in places so remote even satellites might miss them, are figures unlike anything else in human art. Wide heads, black, round eyes, no mouth, halo-like auras of radiating lines painted in white, standing upright, motionless, watchful. These are the Wandjina. To the Aboriginal people who have lived here for tens of thousands of years, the Wandjina are not gods. They are not aliens. They are ancestors, creators, beings of immense power who came during the dreaming, the sacred time when the world was soft, unformed, alive in ways we no longer understand. The dreaming is not the past. It is a layer of reality, a deeper current beneath our daily lives. And the Wandjina are its architects. They shaped the land, the rivers, the trees, the weather itself. They gave the people their laws, their songs, their responsibilities. Then they retreated, not into the sky, but into the rocks, into the earth, into the paintings. And now they watch. The Wandjina are always painted without mouths. The elders say it's because their power is too great. If they spoke, the rain would never stop. Others say it's because they communicate not through voice, but through thought. And then there are the halos, radiant circles around their heads, lines pulsing outward. Some say these represent lightning. Others say they are energy fields. A third possibility lingers, unsaid, that they are helmets. Because here's the thing, they don't look like anything else in Aboriginal art. Most dreaming figures are highly stylized, dot paintings, X-ray animals, dynamic movement. But the Wandjina are still realistic, iconic, and they look different. Not quite human, not quite anything from this world. They resemble almost exactly the beings drawn by modern-day people who claim contact with extraterrestrials. Not vaguely, exactly, and yet they predate all of that by millennia. Some of the oldest Wandjina figures are over 4,000 years old. They were painted and repainted for generations. Even now, their descendants return to touch up the figures, renewing the connection, keeping the presence alive. Because the Wandjina aren't history, they're still here. Some Aboriginal stories speak of them descending from the sky. Others say they came from the Milky Way. They arrived when the Earth was new. They brought form to the formless. Then they returned to the stars, or to the mountains, or deep underground. Some say they left through the sea. Others say they went into the dream itself. Not death, transition. There are tales of the Wandjina punishing those who break the old laws, striking with lightning, bringing drought or flood. They are not passive spirits. They are enforcers, guardians. Their silence is not weakness, it's vigilance. Anthropologists for decades cataloged these stories as spiritual metaphor. Beautiful, yes, but symbolic, allegorical. But the more you hear them, the way they're told, not just what they say, the more you feel like the people aren't remembering a myth, they're remembering an event. The Wandjina are not alone in Aboriginal memory. There are also the Mimi spirits, tall, thin, elongated beings, said to have taught humans how to hunt and paint. Some are drawn climbing vertically on sheer rock walls. Some seem to vanish into cracks in the stone, and again, always the same direction, upward, away. Why would a people isolated for tens of thousands of years carry myths that so precisely match the sky beings spoken of in cultures across the globe? Why would they paint beings with no mouths, large black eyes, haloed heads, beings that match the modern descriptions of greys long before science fiction ever imagined such a form? Unless they didn't imagine it, unless they saw it, unless they remembered. Today, few speak openly about these connections. Aboriginal elders guard their sacred stories carefully and rightly so. They are not for outsiders to decode, but sometimes, when asked gently, they will confirm. The Wandjina are not just ancestors, they are something older, something from the stars, something that will return if the balance is broken. Some even say the return has already begun. Modern researchers, perhaps searching too eagerly for affirmation, have scoured these sites with scanners and drones. What they found beneath some of the oldest paintings are magnetic anomalies, unusual electromagnetic fields. The land hums, the stone pulses. It's as if the image isn't just painted on the surface, but printed into the rock itself, like a fingerprint burned into time, or a lock waiting for a key. Perhaps the Wandjina were never meant to be worshipped. Perhaps they were meant to be remembered. Their messages not in words, but in presence. In the still silent gaze that seems to look through the paint, through the stone, through us. And if they were real, if they came from the stars, shaped the earth, then vanished into the dreaming, then what we see on those cave walls is not just art, it's a photograph, and it's watching. The clay tablets were never meant to survive, pressed with reeds, dried in the sun, left to the winds of empire and sand. But they did survive. Thousands of them buried beneath collapsed temples and forgotten ziggurats, waiting quietly until modern men pulled them from the dirt. They were hoping for tales of trade, farming, early kings. What they found instead was a history too vast, too alien to be called myth. The Sumerians didn't just record harvests or prayers, they recorded lineage. They wrote down who ruled them and from where. They called them the Anunnaki. In Sumerian, it means those who came down from the heavens. Not metaphorically, literally. They didn't say the gods lived in the sky. They said they came from the sky, landed, interacted, taught, ruled, and then left. The oldest tablets say kingship didn't evolve. It descended from above. The Sumerian king list begins not with mortals, but with kings who ruled from heaven. Some reigned for thousands of years, not allegory, specific numbers, names, timelines. The scribes weren't guessing, they were remembering. The Anunnaki were not distant, invisible deities. They had ranks, roles, and names. Enki, the god of wisdom, who descended into the Abzu, the watery deep, to tinker with creation. Enlil, the storm lord who wielded weapons of fire and vibration. Ninhursag, the mother figure who shaped life in her laboratory of clay and breath. These weren't floating spirits. They had duties, relationships, conflicts. One tablet tells the story of how humanity began, not with lightning or magic, but with intervention. The Anunnaki, the story goes, had come to Earth on a mission. Some say for resources, others say for colonization. They worked the land, dug the mines. But over time they grew weary. The labor was too much. So they created a helper, an intelligent worker, us. Not in their image, but with their imprint. They used what was already here, the primitive hominids of Earth, and they modified them. not through miracles, through bioengineering. The tale of Adamu, the first man, appears long before the biblical Adam. In both stories, man is shaped from earth, but in Sumer, the clay is mixed with divine essence, a genetic spark. The Anunnaki didn't just make us, they upgraded us. If this is myth, it's remarkably specific. If it's fiction, it's incredibly technical. And if it's truth, it changes everything. The story deepens with the tale of the flood. Before kings ruled from cities, the Anunnaki saw their human creation multiplying too quickly, becoming chaotic. So, they sent a deluge, not out of anger, but to reset. One man, Atrahasis, was warned by Enki. He built a boat, preserved life. This story, nearly identical to Noah's, was carved into clay over 1,000 years before Genesis. Why does this matter? Because if the Sumerians invented this, it would be the root of all other flood myths. But if they were remembering it, then every story that came after Babylonian, Hebrew, Greek would be echoes of a single ancient truth. There's also something else, a detail scholars skip past. The Anunnaki didn't all agree. Some believed humans should be nurtured. Others wanted them controlled or destroyed. There was division among them, conflict, even war. And then they left, or at least most did. But the tablets hint at return, that they would come back when the stars aligned, that the age of the gods was not over. It was paused. In the temple complexes of Eridu, and Nippur, the Anunnaki were honored not with worship, but with maintenance. The ziggurats were not churches. They were landing zones, interfaces, places where heaven and earth could meet without fire or fear. Priests didn't chant. They performed rituals based on timing, sound, vibration. The Sumerians believed they were preserving technology disguised as religion. And buried beneath all of it, the Akkadian phrase repeated like a drumbeat. Ilu Ailu, God-man. Hybrids, those who walked among humans but were not fully human. Children of the Anunnaki given power, given thrones. Their bloodlines would ripple across the ancient world through pharaohs, emperors, kings of the Indus and the Andes. Not myth, continuity. Today, the idea of the Anunnaki lives mostly in fringe circles, dismissed by academics, mocked in media, but the tablets remain, thousands of them, quietly kept in museum drawers, untranslated, unread, and those that have been read are rarely discussed. Why? Because if even a fraction of the Sumerian records are true, then our understanding of history is backwards. We are not the peak of civilization, we are the aftermath. The scattered children of a broken experiment, walking through ruins, convinced we were always alone. The Vatican rises like a city-state of stone, crowned in gold and silence. Tourists walk its corridors, staring up at the painted ceilings, the towering saints, the endless marble. They see faith, devotion, tradition. But behind its closed doors, deeper than the Sistine Chapel, beyond the reach of the public eye, is a place few have entered, the Vatican's secret archives. Over 50 miles of shelving, thousands of years of letters, manuscripts, lost gospels, forbidden texts. Some say history is written by the victors. But here, in these locked rooms, it's preserved by the gatekeepers, not erased, just hidden. Throughout the ages, the church has been a paradox, proclaiming the heavens while guarding against heresy, teaching of angels while denying the existence of others, preaching divine mysteries while quietly collecting every scrap of pagan myth, apocryphal account, and ancient symbol that might suggest another origin. Why? Because the church may know something it cannot say. In the Old Testament, the sky is not a metaphor. It opens, it speaks, it burns. The prophet Ezekiel describes a vision, a flying structure of metal, glowing wheels within wheels, creatures with 4 faces and wings that shimmer like molten brass. Theologians call it a vision of God's glory. Engineers read it and see a craft, a machine. Ezekiel wasn't dreaming. He was recording. In Genesis, the sons of God come down to earth and mate with the daughters of men. The offspring are giants, the Nephilim. The church today says these are symbolic, but early Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch, banned from the Bible, describe these beings in chilling detail: watchers from the sky, beings of fire and light. They came with knowledge and agendas. Why were these stories removed? Because they blurred the line between angel and alien. In medieval and Renaissance art, the sky is often filled with more than clouds. Strange orbs hover above crucifixions. Metallic discs shine behind Mary. In a 1350 fresco in the Visocchi de Ciani monastery, two angels fly spacecraft across the sky, each one piloting a pod with controls wearing what look suspiciously like suits. Are they metaphor or memory rendered in pigment? Leonardo da Vinci painted the Madonna with Saint Giovannino. In the background, a small dark saucer floats in the air. Below it, a man shades his eyes, looking upward. No one talks about this. It's not in the tour guide books, but it's there, hidden in plain sight. Even in the stories of Christ himself, echoes persist. A being from the sky, born of a virgin, radiating light, transfiguring on a mountain, ascending into heaven, promising to return. These aren't just miracles. They follow the exact narrative arc of other sky beings told in older cultures. The arrival, the mission, the departure, the prophecy. So, is Christ divine? Yes. But maybe divinity isn't what we thought. Maybe divine isn't code for magic. Maybe it's code for technology we don't understand. In the book of Revelation, the end of days begins with the sky opening like a scroll. A being descends, surrounded by trumpets, light and chaos. A new city appears, descending, not rising, a structure of crystal, of symmetry, of impossible scale. John calls it New Jerusalem. Today we would call it a vessel. Is it symbolic, perhaps? But why has the Church in private studied astronomy more than any other institution? Why does the Vatican own one of the most advanced observatories on Earth? Why is it searching the stars with a telescope named Lucifer? The name is not accidental. It's an acronym: Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility, with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. But still, they chose that name. The Lightbringer, the Fallen One, the first rebel against divine order. What are they looking for, or who? Even the popes have begun to shift their language. In recent years, high-ranking Vatican officials have stated publicly that belief in extraterrestrial life does not contradict the teachings of the Church, that if other beings exist, they are part of God's creation, that they may not need salvation, that they may be more spiritually advanced than us. This is not casual speculation. This is preparation, because the Church, perhaps more than any other institution, understands the power of narrative. It knows that if contact is made, if a craft lands, or a signal is received, or a truth is unveiled, it must have a way to adapt, to hold the faithful, to integrate the ancient story of Earth into a broader one of the cosmos. But maybe it already has. Maybe deep beneath the Vatican and vaults, no one speaks of lies, a record, not just of saints and martyrs, but of visitations, of artifacts, of sightings, of warnings. Some whisper of a document called the chronovisor, an alleged device built in secret by Vatican scientists in the 20th century. It could see through time, they say, view past events, even the crucifixion, a mix of science and spirit, hidden ever since, too dangerous to destroy, too explosive to reveal. Perhaps the greatest secret the Church keeps isn't that beings from beyond once came here. It's that they shaped the story, and the Church, knowingly or not, became the keeper of their legacy, wrapped in parable, painted in light, spoken in tongues, waiting for the moment the sky opens again. There's a pull in ancient stories, not just upward, but down, a descent, not into hell, but into mystery, into the belly of the world. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries all whisper the same refrain, that there is something beneath us, not lava, not death, but life, structures, light, even entire cities. They call it many names. The Hindus speak of Shambhala, a pure land beneath the Himalayas, accessible only to the worthy. The Buddhists describe a vast underground kingdom ruled by enlightened beings far older than humans, guiding history from behind the veil. The Hopi tell of ant people who sheltered their ancestors underground during cataclysms. The Tibetans say the entrances to this world are guarded, hidden in deserts, mountains, and ice. The occultists called it Agartha, a network of subterranean chambers, tunnels, and cities stretching across the globe, linked beneath every continent, ruled by a council of advanced beings. Some say they are ancient humans, survivors of a past civilization that once ruled the surface before retreating below. Others say they're not human at all. In every version, they are waiting. The stories aren't vague. They describe advanced technology, doors that open with thought, light that glows without fire, transport systems that use sound, vibration, magnetism, libraries carved into crystal, machines that hum with forgotten power. It reads like science fiction, yet these tales are thousands of years old. In 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a decorated American naval officer, flew a mission over the South Pole. In his private journal, later leaked but never confirmed, he described something extraordinary, an entry into a vast, warm area beyond the ice. Mountains, forests, mammoths, and aircraft that outmaneuvered his own. He claimed he was brought to meet an elder of a subterranean civilization, warned about the surface world's obsession with war, then released back into silence. Most dismiss it as a hoax, but others note Byrd wasn't the only one. Nazi Germany conducted secret expeditions into Antarctica. Some believed the Aryan race originated from Agartha, that the gods of their ancient myths came not from the sky, but from below. Hitler believed in the hollow earth theory. His scientists searched for hidden entrances, mapping tunnels in South America and Tibet. After the war, whispers of a secret base beneath the ice spread through intelligence circles. Operation High Jump, Byrd's real expedition, returned early under mysterious circumstances. No official explanation. Coincidence? In Cappadocia, Turkey, beneath the earth, lies the city of Derinkuyu. Carved deep into volcanic rock, it could house over 20,000 people. It has ventilation shafts, food storage, stables. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a civilization, and it wasn't alone. Dozens of other cities lie beneath the region, connected by tunnels. Who were they hiding from, or who were they joining? Even in modern times, military installations, train systems, and deep bunkers hint at something else, at a human obsession with going underground. Perhaps it's instinct, or perhaps it's memory. There are legends that say the beings of Agartha once walked openly among us, that in the early days, before the flood, before the reset, they lived side by side with surface humans, but after a great cataclysm or a betrayal, they retreated. Some say it was a war, others say it was choice. They saw what was coming and left, preserving knowledge beneath stone and time, and yet, they've always kept watch. Some believe Agartha is the real origin of many so-called gods, that Zeus, Enki, Osiris, and even Quetzalcoatl weren't extraterrestrials, but intraterrestrials, emerging from hidden kingdoms to shape surface civilization before vanishing again into myth. What's more, these stories align with science in strange ways. We now know the Earth's crust is not solid throughout. There are cavities, heat pockets, magnetic anomalies, entire ecosystems in caves miles below the surface, microbes living in isolation for millions of years, lakes sealed beneath ice. In theory, large pockets of habitable space could exist, not as fantasy, as fact. And then there are the tunnels. From the Americas to Asia, from Egypt to Norway, there are myths of subterranean highways. Some say they were once used for travel or escape. Others say they still are. That beings move silently beneath our feet, observing, influencing, waiting for the cycle to turn once more. In Agartha, time moves differently. Energy flows cleanly. Disease does not spread. War does not touch the walls. It is not paradise, but balance. Some say those who dwell there are not immortal, but extended, preserved by their harmony with the Earth's core. And maybe that's why they left the surface, not in arrogance, but in mourning. We call it hollow Earth, but perhaps it's not hollow. Perhaps it's full of what we used to be, full of what we might become again if we remember, because the myths agree. The day will come when the surface and the inner world meet again, not through conquest, through reckoning. When the surface can no longer hide its fractures, the gate will open and the ancient ones will rise, not to rule, but to restore. The earth spins in silence. To most, it is home, a miracle of life floating in a vacuum of death. But to some, it is something else. A construct, a design, a container, not a paradise, but a prison. The idea seems absurd until you look back, not at the story we tell ourselves, but at the story carved into stone, whispered in temples, buried under ruins. The story of gods who came from the sky, who shaped us, ruled us, taught us, and abandoned us or caged us. The names change: Anunnaki, Nomo, Wanjana, Kachinas. But the arc remains. They came, they made, they left, and they left us behind. Across Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, Mesoamerica, and the Arctic tundra, a strange pattern repeats. Sudden bursts of civilization, out-of-place artifacts, knowledge that appears whole, not evolved, architecture that defies explanation, myths of golden ages followed by collapse, then silence, then rediscovery, like a cycle, a system rebooting itself again and again. We call it history, but what if it's sentencing? There are those who believe Earth was not created randomly or lovingly, but strategically, that it is not simply a habitable zone orbiting a stable star, but a quarantined zone. That long ago a rebellion fractured the cosmos, and those who led it, those who posed a threat to the balance, were exiled here, not to be destroyed, but to be contained. The myths speak of war in the heavens, of fallen beings, of watchers cast down. The Book of Enoch, banned from the Bible, names them. The Sumerians list them. The Greeks remember them as titans. The Hindus as asuras. Not evil, just disobedient, too curious, too powerful. Their punishment, earth. But what do you do with divine prisoners? You make them forget. You limit them. You scatter their memories into symbols, art, bloodlines, dreams. You take a being of vast consciousness and reduce it to flesh, fear, instinct. You build systems, religions, empires, currencies, borders to keep them occupied, distracted, disconnected. And then you wait, because eventually some will start to remember. They'll see too much in an ancient painting, hear too much in a forgotten tongue, dream too vividly of places they've never been. They'll ask why the pyramids align with Orion, why myths separated by oceans describe the same beings, why the Vatican watches the stars, why ancient structures hum at specific frequencies, why humans alone seem out of sync with the natural world, born too early, dependent too long, always yearning for something up there. The walls begin to crack, and when enough cracks form, the whole illusion trembles. That's where we are now. We've sent machines into space, split atoms, built gods out of code, yet inside something ancient stirs. Not arrogance, recognition, like we've done this before, like we were never meant to stay here. But not everyone is ready, because if Earth is a prison, then what are we? The inmates, the guards, the experiment. Were we made as servants, as the Sumerians suggest, genetically altered to obey? Or were we gods ourselves, fragmented into amnesia, slowly clawing our way back to memory? Some say the return is near, that the visitors, the creators, the wardens, the witnesses are watching, that they've been watching through discs in the sky, through mirrors in the desert, through bloodlines passed down in silence. They wait to see if we awaken, if we ascend, or if we destroy ourselves again. Because a prison only functions if its inmates don't realize it's a prison. Once they do, one of two things happens. The system adapts or it collapses. Maybe the myths were never meant to terrify. Maybe they were warnings from our past selves, clues, not to make us paranoid, but to remind us. This isn't our first cycle. It might not be our last, but it could be the one where we choose to remember who we were, to reclaim what was taken, to rewrite the story not from the ground up, but from the stars down. And if Earth was a prison, then maybe it was also a test. A chrysalis, not to contain us forever, but to see if against every lie, every chain, every shadow cast across our sky, we could still remember how to fly. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.